Now time for oral questions. Member from Thornhill.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Finance Minister. Yesterday, Minister Duncan said the sole source deal he handed to H.H. Angus to operate the Windsor Energy Centre was, and I quote, a temporary arrangement to facilitate keeping the lights on. Well, I've looked at the Premier's July 20th news release, and it doesn't say when this government's pledge to end sole source contracts may be set aside. Has a list of excuses for breaking the Premier's word been made available to the public?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, again, there's a commercial dispute going on between the OLG and the private company involved. The matter's before the courts. It's inappropriate for me to comment on the details of that dispute beyond what I have said in the House before. And again, Mr. Speaker, this government is committed to openness, to transparency. We have changed the spending practices that governments over the years have and across political parties have pursued. Mr. Speaker, in the context of how the government itself does business. And Mr. Speaker, as I say, with respect to the Energy Centre at Casino Windsor, it is a matter before the courts. There's a dispute. We did win an injunction, Mr. Speaker, which allowed to keep that centre open, and my understanding is the arrangement which was done by the OLG.
Supplementary.
Well, asking about a commercial dispute, the news release issued by the Premier does not qualify the ban on untendered contracts. In fact, the very first highlight of the changes listed is, quoting again, all new Ontario government consulting contracts must follow a competitive hiring process regardless of dollar value. But Minister Duncan and the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Commission have managed to sign off on at least 2 gigantic sole-sourced contracts since the Premier said there would be no more sole-source deals. No more sole-source deals. Minister Duncan gave lame excuses in both instances. How many excuses are there, Minister?
Mr. Speaker, in terms of the situation that involved that specific contract, I do know that steps were taken well in advance of the new policy to provide for the emergency operation of that energy centre in the event that the legal dispute, which, as I say, is before the courts, got to a point where they would potentially not be producing the energy that was needed. So it may in fact be that that was signed well in advance of the new policy as part of a response that would be dependent, Mr. Speaker, on actions that would be taken by the courts. As the member opposite knows, OLG did win an injunction to keep possession.
Thank you. Final supplementary.
Speaker, when the new rules came in, Minister Takar said, quoting, taxpayers deserve to know that their money is being spent properly. The new rules make ministries and agencies more transparent and accountable, unquote. He didn't say some ministries and some agencies. He says it applies to all ministries and agencies. He promised transparency and accountability. Perhaps Integrity Czar Takar needs to have a little chat with Minister Duncan. Minister, your conduct shows that you don't believe the Premier's edict applies to you, but hopefully you still understand what transparency means. Just how many other sole source deals have you handed out since the promise that these untendered contracts would stop?
Again, Mr. Speaker,
the Tories had all kinds of untendered contracts. I remember that. You did it all the time. All the time.
The contract in question was done prior to the new policy, Mr. Speaker. It was done as part of a plan to ensure the continuing operation. And I'm sure the member would want the public to know that a competitive bid is now underway for the permanent operator of that facility.
Question, the member from Thornhill.
Again to the Minister of Finance. Back when you made a big show of firing Kelly McDougall, you called the Windsor Energy Centre a boil to be lanced. It was constructed in a rush. You didn't bother to tell Ontarians they were on the hook for an additional $80 million for a project in your riding. And this just in, we now find out that generators at the Windsor Energy Centre have never produced any power. It seems that you spent $80 million to build a giant air conditioner, Minister, and that this is not a temporary arrangement to keep the lights on at all. Can you tell us, Minister, does the Windsor Energy Centre work?
Minister.
I would refer the member to public. Accounts, Mr. Speaker, and I would say, Mr. Speaker, that in fact there were and continue to be challenges at OLG. I acknowledge that. We want to ensure that all of our Crown agencies are operating at maximum efficiency. When things don't go as well as we would like, we take steps to ensure that the public trust is maintained. The member will see in public accounts the disclosures of these various expenditures. They're there. They've been there. I think they were disclosed in 2006. I say to the member opposite. I am in the process now of. We have an interim board operating the OLG, Mr. Speaker, and I am in the process of getting a permanent board to ensure that those important sources of revenue continue to operate, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary.
Get a briefing on the Windsor Energy Centre and the minister could attend. What's the point of promising to stop untendered contracts if you're not going to do it, Minister? It looks like Minister Duncan couldn't wait to sidestep the rules. At the very time we were debating new legislation to support the McGuinty Liberals' promise, Dwight Duncan and OLG signed not one, but two untendered contracts. The RFP drafts prove that what he said about needing to do the Casino Niagara deal with Bob Lopinski is wrong. The fact that the Energy Centre in Windsor hasn't even been commissioned proves that what he said about needing to do the $15,000 a day deal with Angus is wrong. How do you explain such a calamity of incompetence to taxpayers? Minister, why do all your excuses end up being wrong?
Sir.
Why did you do what the Tories did?
In 1996, the then government of the day signed a lease with Casino Niagara. There were, Mr. Speaker, 3-month renewals when the lease expired.
I know this one.
And there were a number of them signed between 2001 and 2002. Similar to what we did, which the member has called, I apologize, I think I couldn't hear over the din. I think he talked about incompetence. The signature on those three renewals was one Tim Hudak, Mr. Speaker. And I think the member may not want to be casting such aspersions on the talents of his leader.
Supplementary.
Well, Speaker, I would just like to recap the facts here. Minister Duncan, no one else, planned to spend $400 million on the casino expansion and went over budget. And he planned to spend $50 million for an energy centre and he went over budget. He's claimed that it was necessary to sole source a contract to keep the lights on, your words, but the $80 million energy centre hasn't produced any power. You signed off on an untendered contract for no reason. You've made a mockery of the Premier's word that the McGuinty Liberals were done with these sole source deals. Signing off on sole source contracts was the firing offence that led David Kaplan to resign. What will you do, Minister?
Minister.
No, Ken Hudak cannot resign.
What about Hudak?
Cannot resign.
I believe that the government Mr. Hudak was part of signed those renewals at Casino Niagara, I think I'm going to confirm the number, either on 7 or 8 separate occasions. Mr. Hudak himself was the signatory.
The yak is quiet.
And they did so.
Minister, stop the clock. You have 10 seconds, Minister.
And so Mr. Hudak did, in fact, on 3 occasions sign those renewals, Mr. Speaker. I personally, unlike the member opposite, I thought that was the appropriate thing to do at the time. I thought Mr. Hudak acted appropriately, and we will continue to act appropriately on the file.
Question, Leader of Third Party.